Hey everyone, welcome to Reality TV News Update, the place where we bring you the latest updates, fun moments, and behind-the-scenes stories you won't want to miss. New England Colonies. Main articles: New England Colonies and Puritan Migration to New England 1620 to 1640. Puritans who were fleeing religious persecution were the primary immigrants to New England in the beginning. In 1620, the Pilgrims set sail on the Mayflower to reach Virginia. However, they were thrown off course by a storm and landed at Plymouth, where they agreed to a set of social rules in the Mayflower Compact. About half died in the first winter. Plymouth, like Jamestown, was plagued by disease and starvation, but the local Wampanoag Indians showed the colonists how to grow maize. In 1630, the Puritans and Massachusetts Bay Colony followed Plymouth. They elected their founder, John Winthrop, as governor and maintained a charter for independent government from England. Roger Williams opposed Winthrop's treatment of Native Americans and religious intolerance and established the colony of Providence Plantations, later Rhode Island, on the basis of freedom of religion. Other colonists established settlements on the coasts of what is now New Hampshire and Maine and the Connecticut River Valley. Native American attacks continued, with the most significant occurring in the 1637 Pequot War and the 1675 King Philip's War. New England became a center of commerce and industry due to the poor, mountainous soil making agriculture difficult. Grain mills and sawmills were powered by rivers, and the numerous harbors made trade easier. These industrial centers were surrounded by close-knit villages, and Boston became one of America's most important ports. Middle states. Middle colonies is the main topic. The middle colonies of New York, New Jersey, and Delaware were established in the former Dutch New Netherland in the 1660s. These colonies had a lot of different ethnic and religious groups. At the same time, the powerful Iroquois Confederacy was formed by the Iroquois of New York, who had gained strength from trading fur with Europeans for years. Pennsylvania, founded in 1681 by William Penn as a refuge for religious dissenters such as Quakers, Methodists, and Amish, was the region's final colony. Philadelphia, the colony's capital, rose quickly to prominence as a major commercial hub. The city was populated by Quakers. German immigrants began to pour into the hills and forests of Pennsylvania, and the Scots-Irish moved into the far western frontier. Colonies in the South. Main article: Colonies in the South. The New England and Middle colonies stood in stark contrast to the overwhelmingly rural Southern colonies. Maryland was the second British colony south of New England after Virginia. It was founded in 1632 as a Catholic haven. These two colonies' economies were entirely supported by yeoman farmers and planters. The planters established massive plantations employing slave labor in the tidewater region of Virginia. In 1670, the province of Carolina was established, and Charleston became the region's great trading port. Carolina's economy was more diverse, exporting rice, indigo, and lumber, in addition to tobacco in Virginia. It was divided into North Carolina and South Carolina in 1712. James Oglethorpe founded the Georgia colony in 1732 as a reform colony for the poor and former prisoners and as a border to Spanish Florida. Religion. Main article: American religious history.
After the First Great Awakening, a religious revival in the 1740s, led by preachers like George Whitefield and Jonathan Edwards, religion grew a lot. The awakening influenced evangelicals to place a new emphasis on conversions and divine outpourings of the Holy Spirit that instilled new believers with an intense love for God. Revivals encapsulated those hallmarks and carried the newly created evangelicalism into the early Republic, setting the stage for the Second Great Awakening in the late 1790s. In the early stages, evangelicals in the South, such as Methodists and Baptists, preached for religious freedom and abolition of slavery. Government. Main article, 13 Colonies Colonial Government. The government structure of each of the American colonies was slightly different. A colony was typically governed by a London-appointed governor who oversaw the executive branch and relied on a locally elected legislature to pass laws and vote on taxes. Due to plentiful land and food supplies and low death rates, the American colonies were expanding rapidly by the 18th century. The colonies were more prosperous than most of Britain and attracted a steady stream of immigrants, especially teenagers who came as indentured servants. Servitude and slavery. The main articles are Slavery in America's Colonial History and Indentured Servitude in British America. Indentured servitude was the method by which more than half of all European immigrants to American colonial America arrived. Typically, individuals would sign a contract agreeing to a predetermined period of labor, typically 4 to 7 years, in exchange for transportation to America and a piece of land at the conclusion of their servitude. Exorbitant promises and kidnappings were common because, in some instances, ship captains were compensated for transporting poor migrants. The first African slaves arrived in 1619. As the demand for labor on tobacco and rice plantations grew in the 1660s, the institution of slavery began to harden and the involuntary servitude became lifelong. Slavery became associated with brown skin color, and the children of slave women were born slaves, which was known as partus sequitur ventre. By the 1770s, African slaves made up a fifth of the American population. As long as the colonies needed British military support against the French and Spanish powers, the question of independence from Britain did not arise. By 1765, those threats had vanished. However, in a practice known as mercantilism, London maintained its view that the American colonies existed for the benefit of the parent nation. Slavery and indentured servitude were two forms of unfree labor used in colonial America. Salutary neglect, a policy of avoiding strict parliamentary law enforcement, was also prevalent in the British colonies. As a result, an American spirit emerged that was distinct from that of its European founders.